Who are they
Okay.
selling? That's the first question. Who are they selling?
Yeah, that's a good one. Mm.
I didn't do this. And they can't sue him. Why can't they sue him? Because they know the source of their own fund. If I sue the startup founder and this startup, I myself who use this app, I'll be sued
Mm.
as well. And there are a lot of apps like that, but I'm not going to mention them. So that's it.
All
So
right,
a lot of things like that.
Daxonetete William. I mean, this is a whole lot of research you've done. It's amazing. I think we should look at having a live session. It's amazing. It's amazing the amount of research you've done. I want you to push boundaries a bit more into African tech incubators. Um, do you think they are doing well? Do you think we need more of them? What are they giving birth to? What kind of companies are coming out from African tech incubators? And maybe you want to touch a little bit on ownership of these companies that they're giving birth to. Delaware is there, and then and how many investors in Africa are actually investing in these in companies born by these incubators? So a little bit more about the incubator industry, particularly with respect to tech and with respect to the kind of companies that are being born.
Okay, so you, if I must get you correctly, you are asking about incubators and the kind of companies in Africa that are being vetted by these incubators, and how well these companies are thriving, and the kind of investment that are coming. And you mentioned Delaware. Okay, so Delaware is one of the incubator startup in Africa. We have Mest Africa as well. We have Bob Africa. We also have
Mm,
Disrupt Africa incubators. Then we
mm,
have MTN incubators and accelerators program as well. We have
mm,
VC for Africa. We have a lot of them. We have a lot of them. So this is the thing here. Incubators, if incubators in Africa are really necessary, yes, they are 100% necessary and they are playing a huge role in Africa. And I commend that. At least they are helping filter some scam startups in Africa. They help filter some scam startups in Africa. So what this incubators program does, starting from separating the difference between incubators and accelerators, incubators program are focused on nurturing infant startups into maturity stage. So, for example, if I have a startup idea, probably my startup is still in the ideation stage. There are some incubators program that welcome startups still in ideation stage, and they groom it from ideation into MVP, from MVP into market readiness. And there are some startups that welcome, there are some incubator programs that welcome startups in the MVP stage. They groom
mm,
it from MVP stage to market readiness and all of that. There are some startup incubators that welcome programs even on market readiness and groom it to investors readiness and all of that. So
mm.
incubators program generally actually focus on grooming startups from infants to maturity into readiness stage. While accelerators program actually groom actually don't groom startups, but they are programs that help startups scale in the long run.
Mm,
They help them scale. That is where you can announce that, oh, this startup actually raised so amount of money in seed funding, so amount of money in pre-seed funding, and all of that. That is what accelerators does. Incubator has no business in helping startup raise funds. They help nurture startups, supply startup all the necessary support they need, and that is it. So the kind of startups that incubators are actually betting in Africa, they are amazing startups ranging from fintech to energy to health, fintech, energy, health, climate startups, and all of that. And so far, these startups are performing. So far, statistics has shown you that approximately 82% of startups that emanate from incubators survive the long run.
mm,
Approximately 82% of startups that emanate from incubators program actually survive the long run, contrary to the contrary to the 90% 80-20% rule, that 80-20% rule that also applies to startups in Africa, that says that only 10% of African startups actually survive
mm.
in the ecosystem. Contrary to that, it is true that 10 only 10% of startups, approximately 10% of startups in Africa actually survive the long run in the ecosystem. But in that 10% of startups in Africa, in that 10% that actually survive the long run,
Mm,
that actually survive operations in the long run, in that 10%, 82%, in that 10%, we have 100% that emanate from incubators. Sorry to say, in that 10%, 82% of startups in that 10% that emanate from incubators program survive the long run, which
Yeah.
means that majority of startups in Africa that survive the long run actually come from incubators. That's to tell you the impact incubators are already making in Africa already.
Mm.
Because most startup founders lack direction. Most startup founders actually lack direction. They lack direction.
Okay.
Yes, most startup founders lack direction. So they just come up with ideas, amazing ideas. They get co-founders, they build and all of that. But do they really have the strategies to pivot in the long run? They
Mm.
don't have it. Do they have
Wow.
this strategy to pivot in the long run? Do they have one-on-one mentorship with industry experts who will put them through this thing and be like, okay, this is how you do. In this stage, there are certain things you do in this stage. In this stage, focus on positioning yourself in this stage. Focus on building this actual technology. In this stage, you don't actually need to sell your products because whether we like it or not, there are stages startups get to that they don't really need to sell their products. What they need to do is to put their product out there for early adopters.
Mm-hmm.
We have early adopters, we have late adopters, we have the laggards. We have the laggards. It's
Yeah.
like it's a five curve something. According to Eric Rice, or is it that Eric Rice or Peter Thiel stated that in the Lean Startup Technology or the Zero to One? Either of those books actually stated something like that. We have the startup curve. You get now, so you don't have to focus on selling, but you have to focus on testing your product in the market. Test your product in the market. But you see, most startup founders don't even take time to test their products. Although I'm currently consulting for a startup firm in Uganda, and I'm also currently a ride-hailing startup firm in Uganda, and I'm also currently consulting for a prop tech firm in Lagos, Nigeria as well. Most times when I speak to startups and I ask them the stage they are, have they tested their product? They say yes, they've tested their product, and they come up with false statistics for me. And when I go further into interrogating them, I now realize that these statistics they come up with is actually false. They are just assuming.
Yeah.
You will you will ask them, they will tell you we did a survey of 2,500 people, and this was the result we got. If you look at, sometimes they actually got up to 2,500 people, but their data was not actually analyzed properly. So some feedback that they get as negative feedback, sometimes they interpret it as positive feedback. And
Okay.
so because of that, yes, sometimes they interpret it as positive feedback, which does not actually fit into one of the things they need to actually consider in order to actually discover their product market fit. So that is one thing they actually face. They just come up and tested that. So what incubators program does is that they walk the startup
Mm.
through each stage, and they ensure that these startups actually follow this stage strictly from their ideation to market readiness. Then when they are done now, they can now advance into the accelerators program, thereby helping them pitch, scale in the long run, getting investors funding and all of that. So
That's
so far, incubators program are actually building a lot of amazing startups in Africa, even though they face a lot of challenges as well. Incubators program face a lot of challenges as well. Those challenges are much. They are much. They are much. They range from regulation and all of that. Whether we like it or not, there are some incubators startups. Some incubators startups cannot function in some certain countries. For example, in Rwanda, cryptocurrency is not a legal tender in Rwanda. So in that case now, an incubators program, that this now stems to regulatory issue now. An incubator startup cannot actually function well, grooming startups in Rwanda that are building around the blockchain ecosystem.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm making a
Yeah,
point.
that makes that sound. If the government doesn't like it, you can't even test that market.
Exactly.
You can't even test the
Exactly.
market.
That is the
Cool.
thing here. So they go through a lot of challenges. And
Mm,
aside from that, let's talk about funding as well.
mm,
Most incubators program are not really backed by the founders themselves, by the founders of those incubators startups themselves, but they are backed by donations and international foreign direct investment sometimes.
mm.
And sometimes these incubators don't really get this enough funding. So
Okay.
when they don't have this enough funding, how are they going to support startups who are coming into their programs, build their software programs, especially those who are building software as a service, or especially those who are building mock startups, massive online open courses startups like edtech startups, or
Mm,
those who are building the fintech startups. How are they going to assist these startups take their because whether we like it or not, once a founder gets into one of these incubators program, every responsibility surrounding that startup growth and maturity, whether from ideation or MVP to market readiness, is solely dependent on the incubators program they are getting into.
yeah.
So most incubators program don't even have this funding to cater for startups under them. And so that is why you see incubators programs sometimes don't last in the long run.
Mm. All right.
And sometimes most startups coming into them, when they groom the startups to a certain stage and they are unable to continue, some of them abandon the project. And those startups fail sometimes. And some of them strategically exit. I wouldn't want to mention names of startups
Yeah.
or incubator startups that have done that. It's left for people to go and research by themselves. Let them not go and look for me. So most of these incubator startups strategically exit the market and sell up to incubators, other bigger incubators, giants who can actually
Mm,
cater for the startups under them, and then they exit
mm.
quietly and all of that. So that is
Okay.
it.
That's insightful. My apologies. I think your video has been stuck for a bit. I don't know. Maybe you want to turn it off, turn it on back, and let's see how it goes. It could just be a glitch in the network. Um,
All
I I appreciate the insights you gave us on the difference between the incubators and the accelerators, and the stages a typical startup has to go through. That's so powerful. And the understanding that if you're new in the market, what you want to achieve is adoption first. What you want to achieve
exactly.
is, does the customer like my product, before you
Exactly.
ask, does the investor like my
The product.
company? Right. So I want to ask you to dig into that a little bit by asking the question in another way. What do you think is the balance between merely seeking funding as a founder
Yeah.
and actually solving Africa's problems? And
Problem.
what problems that do we
Okay.
need to be focused on right now?
Okay. So that was 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, I published an article on Taft Insights 2 weeks ago. I published an article on Taft Insights 2 weeks ago.
Mm,
The title of the article, the headline is Rebuilding Trust in Africa as Product Founders. So I was speaking from the lenses of a product manager, something like that. So now I now went to put out a teasing part of it on my LinkedIn that most startups in Africa are built for investors, not for customers. It's just fact. Most
yeah.
startups in Africa are actually built for investors, but not customers. If you see if I've spoken to the average startup founders,
Mm,
all they keep on saying is by the time we get this product to this stage, investors will come in, investors will come in, investors will come in. And it leaves me wondering if they are just after the money.
yeah.
If they are just after the money. And so to say, I don't know how to paint I don't know how to package my words to be so sexy. Actually, I'm not that kind of person. So
Yeah.
it irritates me when I see them always saying, "Fine, everybody have their own priority, but if you are focused on just building for investors, which means that you are focused on your pocket, you don't care about climate safety, the safety of the climatic situation of the continent.
Mm.
You don't care about people's comfortability. You don't care about how this thing solves people's problems. You don't care about if people are breaking their account. Yeah, if people have to break their bank account just
Mm.
to actually patronize your service. You don't care about these things. All you care is that when investors look into my traction, so when investors look into my tractions, when investors look into my traction, they look at the people, they look at how the number of reviews we've gotten, they look at this, look at that, they look at our product market fit, and our product idea is sexy. They look at it that way, they will bring in money.
Mm.
But the amazing thing is that most of these startup founders that think in this direction, they end up not building customers' trust. And because they don't build customers' trust, they end up getting negative reviews whenever they carry out marketing research. They end
Yeah.
up getting negative reviews. And because they end up getting negative reviews, people don't usually use their platform. And because they don't normally people don't use their platform, they don't have enough traction. And simply because they don't have enough traction, they will now falsify data just to attract investors. And after falsifying data to attract investors, they will now come up and announce that investment that invested $60 million in our startups, invested $16 million, $15 million in my startup with false data. And after doing that, give them just about 1 or 2 years. We are shutting down. Why are we shutting down? We couldn't find. They will not tell you that they will not state the real truth why they are shutting down. They couldn't discover their actual product market fit. Their product did not suit the market.
Mm.
If your product did not suit the market, then how come you were able to get $60 million investment funding from investors?
Yeah.
It equally means that you actually lied about your product to get this data. And now you are now coming out to speak the truth. Now, what do you expect future investors to do? What do you expect the trust? How do you expect future investors to trust you?
Yeah.
If by the